Okay, it's a little bit after 6:30, and welcome to week 2 of Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice, J280, and I am Professor Richard Wright, and I'm going to take some time today to cover uh, some of the things for this week's assignment and to provide any answers to any questions if you have any. So let's go ahead and get started right now. I'll share my screen. Actually, it's week 3. Alrighty. So anyway, let's take a look at where we are here this week. Again, I remind you of the assignments, the written assignment, your rubric here, local ethics. Describe the future of criminal justice as related to diversity. We've talked about diversity at the beginning of the quarter during the open house, but we're going to go through that. And disconnected because it seems like we're having trouble. Okay. So now it's gone now. So anyway, as we go ahead and look at week 3, creates a deliverable for this assignment, sharing points to improve ethics. And we talk about ethics a lot in criminal justice, including the demographics. And make sure you satisfy the APA requirements, citations in the body, and references in the end. Make sure you run your papers through Grammarly as well. So then let's move right on down. Remind you there's a rubric here for your discussion post. Many of you have done pretty good with that. And so our lecture for this week is week 3. And reminder that you must attend the live lecture or listen to the archive. And there'll be a keyword given at the end that you're required to give me if you don't attend the live lecture. And I will be keeping record of that information as well. Okay? So let's go over to week 3 announcement. A reminder, diversity is a topic, and you're reading module 3, and then also the discussion assignment. Make sure that you complete your discussion post by your initial post by Tuesday, which was yesterday, and reply post by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, complete the written assignment, local ethics, that we just went over a minute ago, and remind you to have a cover sheet and also a reference page as well. Reminding you to continue to be strong so that you'll finish strong. And I've already talked to you about my motto, adversity is the springboard to success. So let's take a quick look at the calendar for the week. It's a pretty light week, actually. Okay. So for the week of the 15th, it tells the topic, diversity in criminal justice, your initial post that was due, and the topic is working with diverse coworkers and clients. And then, of course, your lecture is taking place right now, and your reply post for Saturday. And then your written assignment, again, reminding you to take a look at the rubric. I already showed you that. It should be a minimum of 1 to 2 pages, not including the reference page. And again, should be APA formatted. Okay. So now let's take a look at the actual assignments again. Our written assignment, I've already told you about this, so I won't go over this. And then your discussion, I told you about the topic there. And then, of course, you're required to attend the lecture this week as well. Okay? So now let's go back and let's look at the lesson content. Go over that before we adjourn this very short session. So diversity. Diversity. How important is diversity in the field of criminal justice? It is very important, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit here. Again, there's the assignments as well. Okay. So that's your lesson content. So now let's spend a few minutes to explain the importance of diversity. First of all, what is diversity? As you should know from open house, that diversity is from the root word diverse, which means various. And so people in criminal justice that you'll be exposed to, starting with the people that you work with, your teams, will be individuals from various backgrounds. As you already have discovered from going to this school particularly, that we have people from various backgrounds, very ethnic, different ethnic groups, different cultures, different faiths, religions, beliefs. And so one of the things that you need to be aware of is that as a criminal justice professional, you will find yourself interacting with individuals who, if you, let's put it on different levels. Let's say if you're in law enforcement, for example, then you're going to be in the field and you're going to run into people who maybe speak a language that you don't understand, maybe are from a culture that you can't relate to. They're a different race and different sexual preferences. And the point of the matter is that we are a world, not just a world, but a country or a melting pot of people from various backgrounds. And so as a criminal justice professional in law enforcement, you will find yourself where you're going to need to be able to respect those individuals with their backgrounds. It is not you to paint an individual with a brush or stereotype those individuals so that they are treated in such a way that because they may be different than you, that you will disrespect them and that you won't understand where they're coming from. If a person, for example, speaks Spanish and you're not that familiar with the culture of the Mexican or the Puerto Rican or other countries, you will find yourself in a situation where you won't be able to understand or connect and interact with them. I've already said that one of the fastest growing populations in the United States, bar none, is Hispanic. and that as a law enforcement officer, you're probably very likely in most urban areas, particularly in a lot of rural areas now too, but in a lot of urban areas to run into people that speak Spanish. So it would behoove you to be able to understand the language. But again, understanding the culture, you might um, not be able to appreciate where that person is coming from if they're trying to reach you, and it's effective as far as serving the diverse communities to be able to communicate and communicate in a professional way. As for dealing in corrections, you run into the same issue. You're going to have to operate whether you are a corrections officer or a officer in a prison or in a jail, or if you're a probation officer or parole officer, you're going to have the same issue. And so it would behoove you to remain open-minded with all people as to where they are coming from. And so it is very critical, as you and I both know, particularly in the law enforcement field, criminal justice is under severe attack. And I think that one of the issues is that we have individuals who don't respect the various individuals from the various cultures, and name calling and things like that. This just gross disrespect. And unfortunately, there are some people in law enforcement who operate on the basis of their culture, and when they deal with individuals, that's how they operate. So in the criminal justice field, in law enforcement, you have to be able to reach the person. Let's say, for example, if you're involved in an investigation and from a background that you don't understand, a culture that you don't understand, the language that the person speaks you don't understand, then you're going to need to understand the language, or at least respect the individual as to where they're coming from. Secondly, there's a strong relationship when it comes to operating in law enforcement, where it says there's a relationship between ethics and diversity, and recognizing, as I said, that the numbers are growing tremendously among the various ethnic groups, various cultures. This country, as you already know, is a melting pot. And so we're going to have people from various countries in the United States that are invited and welcome according to the way that the history of this country has been laid out. Right now, there are some serious issues that are attacking diversity, but and if law enforcement particularly is going to win over the community, it's going to have to be able to appreciate individuals from diverse backgrounds. Ethics. Ethics are so important. I was talking to a police officer on yesterday. We had lunch, or actually breakfast, and we were discussing how important it is for law enforcement officers to operate in an ethical fashion. If you are, first of all, number one, not respecting the constitutional rights of individuals, not respecting individuals, and you know, you got to understand something, that the professional responsibilities that are laid out by most departments, agencies, try to encourage you to remain as professional as you possibly can when you are engaged in an assignment. For example, I have encouraged law enforcement officers not to use cuss words or four-letter words to communicate with a person, because of the fact that it's unprofessional, number one, and then number two, you're pouring coals on a fire. Remember, most of the time, the people that you come in contact with, whether victims or suspects or individuals that are involved in different various roles in your case, may come from a different background, and they're going to be probably in distress, and you're going to need to be calm. Um, and also, in the way that the law is written, with the constitutional rights that are required to be um, protected for each individual, then the officer has to execute those properly. Otherwise, they stand the chance of jeopardizing any possible case, investigation, or prosecution that may come about. So you have to be able to look through, as it says, the lens of the demographics that you're dealing with, the people that you're dealing with when you are operating as a law enforcement officer as well. Same thing, maintaining control. If you're in a correction institution, jail or prison, you're going to have the same issues if you're going to operate with the ability to be able to maintain control. I heard a correction officer say 3 words: firm, fair, and consistent. And operating with those, it keeps your ethics going properly, as well as it keeps you respecting the diversity of individuals. So these are things that are very, 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 very important and remain. And so, as I already have talked about, the current state of diversity of criminal justice professionals is we start with diversity, we in the middle with diversity, and we end with diversity. So you want to recognize as an individual to be trained to, again, operate on the basis that you are, how should I say, it's not quite a parent-child situation, but you're more protective. The motto on many police cars that I've seen is serve and protect. And unfortunately, the community has reached the stage where they say, yes, law enforcement do serve and protect, but it's supposed to be the interests of the individuals that they encounter, the individuals that they service. It's kind of almost like a business where you have customers. Well, in this instance, you will have customers. A lot of those are individuals who find themselves committing something, a violation, even as simple as a traffic stop. If you don't handle the traffic stop correctly, it can escalate into a violent situation. It could also escalate to a level where the officer loses control, and can also result in the use of excessive force, which has been demonstrated in some of the instances that we've seen across the United States, and allegations. So we have a number of those kind of situations where officers will react in a scenario where they go over the policies and procedures of the department. It can result in, like I said, death of an individual or serious personal injury to an individual. Now, with that being said, I am going to take a pause here, and I'm gonna stop here and remind you of what we are dealing with from the whole work. Notice the discussion assignment for the week, working with diverse coworkers and clients. So that when you look at the actual assignments, let's go back and use a little bit more of information from that. You talk about human diversity and the importance, and it's rewarding and it's a challenge at the same time. And these questions asked in discussion is, do you consider yourself to be effective when interacting with people from very diverse backgrounds? And you need to begin to ask yourself these questions because they're important. What methods do you believe can be used to help make interaction more comfortable to you, clients, and or coworkers? And so it reaches the stage where why are we dealing with this? Because it is important. Look at the written assignment, diversity and ethics throughout the media is demonstrated, and how can we improve our relationship within the community relating to the two topics. I call them the twins, ethics and diversity. So the fact of the matter is that diversity is increasing. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. And the demographics in neighborhoods are mixing more. When I was a kid, neighborhoods didn't consist as much of various ethnic groups. And Caucasians lived in one section, and blacks lived in the other, African Americans, what have you. And then we had Mexicans in their area. But now we're reaching a stage now where more and more communities are multi ethnic, or individuals from various backgrounds. In other words, we get more into the issue of diversity. And so it is important that we don't take diversity lightly. And as I say in our school, we take time, even in the document, the syllabus that you have here at this school, that if you take a look at the syllabus, which we did in week 1, but I'm going to bring it back up again so you can see where I'm coming from. And if you look at the syllabus and we talk about our scrolling down, our transferable skills assessment, and you will see diversity. You will also see ethics as responsible activities that you're going to need to be able to transfer from education out into your professional. So you're in criminal justice, whatever aspect of it, you're going to be able to be in the vein of dealing with diversity and dealing from an ethical perspective. And so we spend time making sure. I will be participating on this week, and not this week, but coming up this month, in a session at our summit for employees. And I'll be involved with a discussion, panel discussion, in applying diversity and education and teaching. And I am a strong advocate of respecting people from where they are. You know, you can't empathize with a person unless you understand where they are. Sometimes you've been in their position and sometimes they're not. And don't be so quick to label people as a certain way. Get an understanding of how people are. I'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Years ago, this goes back to the 1960s, actually it was 67, I believe it was, as a African American student, person living in the city of Chicago, in a community in the south side of Chicago that was predominantly black, and we um, partnered with a church group up in a town called Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is up in the northern part near, not too far from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so anyway, in that community, it was primarily Caucasian. And so what we did was we picked a week that we stayed in each other's homes. Some of those students came and stayed with us in our Chicago area, and some of us went up and stayed with them in that area, Eau Claire, or a town called Chippewa Falls, which is very close to that area there. So anyway, what happened is that we encountered things that people said to us when we were up in Wisconsin. I remember one person actually said to me and asked me, an African American, they said they had heard that African Americans or blacks, or as Negroes as they might have known them, had tails. And they asked me, how did we hide our tails? Now, here's what I'm trying to get across to you. And what they were doing, they weren't being racist. They were being ignorant. And ignorance is not something that's encouraged. So it was an opportunity for me to educate those individuals. And I said to them, we don't have that. That's not true. That is something that has never happened, and that you've been misinformed. So we taught them about who we were. They were also surprised at what we ate. They served us everywhere we went, beans and franks. Somehow or another, they must have had a meeting or had a discussion about how to feed the people. And so when you reach the point of how to feed the people, and that was us, that was what they came to. And so we asked them, why do you just give us this? And then they said that this is what we were told and taught, that you people, and this is a term I'm going to harp on in a minute, that's what you eat. But once again, they were operating out of ignorance. So it was an opportunity for us to educate them and teach them about us and who we were. And then that whole thing about the phrase "you people," it is actually, as soon as you say that to any person who understands it, but let's use African Americans because that's where I'm operating from, and a Caucasian says to me, "you people," it says to me that there's something different about me, and it's not a positive statement. It's more like a condescending statement, and the statement can create animosity, close communication, and create, as an end result, misunderstandings. And so we have to teach people that is a term that you don't use because it's a prelude to demonstrating that you don't know anything about me. But more and more now, it's used as a buzz phrase to label you as a racist. But like again, that may not be the case. That may be a term that you used, and you might even later on find out that people use it throughout their own family. A parent might say to the children, they're communicating with you people, and then talking to their own children. But you don't know that, but because of the way it operates. But here's my whole point in a nutshell. You need to be educated to understand what you don't do, what you don't say to individuals. Ethnic jokes, don't do anything in terms of relations between individuals. And we need to, again, because it becomes disrespectful. you get to the point that, for example, you're dealing with sexual harassment issues. Sexual harassment can be as simple as um, some quote what they call locker room talk used, and boys will be boys type stuff, and it results in disrespecting women. And so I work with a lot of females, and I respect those females to the utmost. Looking at, especially as you know already, what's happening I mean, our media. You can't turn on the TV now. If it's not a shooting you're dealing with someone who's coming out who's been uh, guilty of sexual harassment or abuse. Again, that gets back to the issue of diversity. You're dealing with men and women in mutual respect for each other. Same thing applies as far as the races are concerned. So we taught those individuals about us. As a result, too, they came back to Chicago. And when they came here, they saw that, we were very much the same way. Here's the deal. I once made a statement that I don't like people. In fact, I say I hate people that when you cut them, that their blood's not red. Well, everybody knows that blood is not really red, or should know, but that when it hits the air, when we see it, it's red. But my whole point in a nutshell is this, is that we associate blood with redness, and we recognize that individuals of no matter what race, color, national origin, sex, have red blood. Now, there are different blood types, but that the color of the blood is the same. We also recognize something. I remember in the 60s from All in the Family, where Archie Bunker, who was a guy named Carroll O'Connor that played that role, he actually was an individual who was a racist in the TV show, and used all kind of slang terms to describe African Americans and Hispanic people. The point of the matter is, and other ethnic groups, the point of the matter is he specifically demonstrated some of the walls that exist in the country to result in miscommunication between various ethnic groups. And I remember there was one particular show that came on where he needed some blood, and he ended up getting a blood transplant, a blood transfusion, I should say, and he discovered that it was a black person whose blood that he had gotten that was his type. Black people have A and O and O negative and all of those, as white people do as well. The point of the matter is that when it gets into your body, it operates the same way. I'm reminded of a video that I saw on Facebook, and in this video, there was a couple who had a child, and they were at the doctor's office because the doctor had performed some kind of transplant as a part of the body, and there was a donor. And so anyway, at the beginning of the video, this person of another ethnic group, I don't remember whether it was Arab or whatever. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that I don't know if it was Arab and Jews that were involved here, but anyway, the point of the matter is that let's just, for the sake of scenario, say the young man was Arab, and that the family were Jews. And so anyway, when it came time, they saw him. The husband moved the ladies, his daughter and wife, to the other side and kept an eye on this guy, looking at him in a suspicious fashion, had drawn a conclusion about him. And so as a result of that uh, taking place. When the nurse came out to tell them to come in, and they told the Arab guy to come in too, they looked kind of puzzled. And so anyway, the young man was, you could see he was hurt by it because he dropped his eyes, and he wasn't happy with the way that he felt that they were considering him or viewing him. Well, what ended up happening is that the doctor said, asked the family how was the child doing since the transplant and the surgery, and so anyway, says that she was doing fine, much better, and that we thank God, or we were happy, that she got this transplant. So anyway, the doctor then shifts and says this young man right here, he was the donor. Yeah, yeah. So it was an issue there where all of a sudden they began to realize that this person from another group, another background, another culture was actually the one who saved their child's life. And so we have those. I remember another video that I saw on Facebook where a, uh, a guy was walking, a Caucasian guy was walking down the street, and he was carrying a briefcase and so forth, and he was walking in one direction, and so then passing by a woman and her children or a child, and she was, she just looked, she didn't notice him. She just, oblivious to this person. So then she goes a little further, and then she sees this guy that looks like he's from an Arab, or he was a different culture, and she became concerned about him. So then she sees some people running towards the direction where both these men were heading, and she begins to observe and look, and very concerned. Well, this guy who they went right past the Arab guy, and they ran, and they ended up catching the guy who was the white guy dressed up, and he had in his possession some kind of powdery substance. Suspicion probably that he was a cocaine dealer or a drug dealer. And then they shifted back to the Arab guy, and he had a little backpack on his back, and he let it down, and he was meeting his family, and he had a little something for his child to ride on, and left on with his family. And you could see the look on the face. I'm saying this to say that there are various scenarios, and you're going to run across these situations yourself as a professional. You can't assume just because a person looks a certain way that they're going to possibly commit a crime. And finally, I'm going to say this, is that I participate in seminars every year with law enforcement across the state. And we have a one session that's sponsored by the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And there are law enforcement officers from all backgrounds, various agencies, some federal, some state, and the local agencies. Anyway, there are discussions and Q&A sessions about things that are happening. There are scenarios presented. For example, if you, a officer, come up on an individual and you're Caucasian in an area that's primarily Caucasian, and you see a black person, and they're maybe not dressed in a suit, or they may be dressed in a suit. Whichever way, the fact of the matter is, let's just say they're dressed casually. They may be wearing their hat backwards, wearing shorts, might be jogging. What is your conclusion about that individual? And the discussion was very open, and many of the officers were made to realize that they had formulated certain opinions about this individual. And statements were made like, well, I would be concerned about that individual because I didn't know that individual from the neighborhood. And the question then busted them out to say, hey, look, you know every person in your neighborhood? And the answer is no, not really. But because this person is of a different ethnic group and you have been uh, formulated by your upbringing to believe that individuals from certain ethnic groups commit crime, and when they're present, that that's the only reason that they're in your community, then we got a problem here. And so that problem needs to be fixed. And so that's why we're having this discussion about diversity and how important it is. So anyway, the bottom line is that we need to be able to appreciate people for being who they are and where they're from. So that's my discussion tonight on diversity. I hope some of the examples, some of the illustrations that I presented, you know, get you to think about the issue, and that your research that you do this week will help you to be able to formulate positions that will be beneficial to helping law enforcement or criminal justice, I would say, using the overall thing, to be placed in a better light, and that the media reports and then there are acts of kindness that happen with individuals from law enforcement. Those are great. And I see those. I see those on Facebook. But here's my point. We don't even want to have one instance where an individual is being disrespected, or there's a assumption or presumption based on that person's belief, and they've stereotyped those individuals. So we need to fix that, and that's something that starts at home, actually, and it should continue on through you know, your organization, your churches, you know, and things like that. I will say this finally, that I heard a pastor say, and this was a Caucasian pastor, he said that one of the most segregated hours of the week happens between roughly 10 and 12 o'clock on Sundays, that there are Caucasian churches and there are black churches or African American churches. I recently visited a church and I was looking for some friends there. It turns out they weren't there at that church anymore in a suburban community near where I live. But I went in there and I was the only African American in the church service. There were about 300, 400 people in there. And when I walked in, people looked at me. You can pick it up and see it. And there was, even though I was dressed, I had a suit on. They were casual in service, but I was dressed up because that's the way that we do in our church. And so I was stopping in there on my way to my church. And so people viewed me and looked at me like, you know, I could tell. And then when I introduced myself and mentioned that, you know, I was looking for some people that I knew, and then I found out they weren't there, they weren't members of that church anymore, they relaxed. But I'm trying to say this. Before they relaxed, they had certain conclusions that were there, and I could feel them. And it's unconsciousness that takes place. We have a thing that we discuss in a seminar called unconscious bias, where in our mindset that we've already been programmed to think about individuals in a certain way. We need to fix that so that we recognize that people are people. So it's about 7:15 p.m. Going on roughly 40 to 45 minutes. And so I'm going to um, adjourn this session. And if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to me. So what is the key word for this week? How about this? It starts with a D and it ends with a Y. And it is the topic of this week. I'm not even going to say what it is, but it's not a hard thing for you to know if you paid attention to what this week was all about. It starts with a D and it ends with a Y. And that's the key word that I'm going to be looking for. I want to see that word, and then I'll know you understood what the topic of this week's lecture was all about. Not the word ethics either, because obviously it doesn't start with a D or end with a Y. So I'm going to say good night, and I'll be looking for that key word. Good night.